Hello readers, welcome to this channel. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you. As you do so, sit back and relax as we dive into this story. The rain had stopped, but the village lane was still a mess. Brown water filled every dip in the road. The mud was thick and heavy, clinging to shoes and wheels. Elinor Hart lifted her skirt with one hand and held a basket in the other. Her boots sank with every step. She could feel cold mud seeping in at the sides. She did not slow down. Her father's cough had been worse that morning. He tried to hide it, but she heard the rattle in his chest. Her mother had pressed a hand to his forehead and said nothing. That silence scared Elinor more than any words. They needed money. They needed food. They needed to pay rent before the steward came around again. "Don't dawdle, Elin," her mother had said, tying the basket. "Sell everything. Don't come home with even one egg left." So Elinor hurried, heart beating fast, thinking of nothing but the market and the coins she had to bring home. Then she turned the corner into the narrowest part of the lane and stopped dead. A large carriage blocked the way. It was dark green with shiny brass trim, far too grand for their little village. Two tall horses stood hitched to it, their flanks damp, their breath steaming in the cool air. The carriage sat right in the middle of the road, as if it owned it. A few villagers waited on the far side, baskets in hand. One old woman leaned on a stick, looking tired and annoyed. A boy tried to squeeze past in the ditch, slipped, and almost fell. On the coachman's seat, a man in a worn hat sat with his arms crossed. He did not move. Elinor swallowed and stepped closer. "Excuse me," she called up, trying to keep her voice polite. "Could you pull the carriage over a little? We need to get by." The coachman barely glanced at her. "Horses are resting," he said. "Road's too muddy. You'll have to wait." Elinor looked at the ditch. It was deep and full of brown water. If she tried to go that way, she would ruin the eggs in her basket and maybe hurt her ankle. The old woman on the other side would never manage it. "We can't just wait," Elinor said, feeling heat rise in her chest. "People need to reach the market. Please, just move a little." "The horses," the coachman repeated, as if that explained everything. A man's voice floated down from inside the carriage. "What is it, Pike?" "Village folk," the coachman replied. "Want us to move. Road's not fit." There was a pause. Then the door of the carriage opened. A young man stepped down onto the muddy road. The first thing Elinor noticed was his coat. It was deep blue wool, cut in a way she saw only in town, with silver buttons and a high collar. His boots looked new. His hair was dark and neatly brushed. His face was calm, almost bored, as if nothing here could really touch him. His eyes moved over the lane, the villagers, and finally rested on Elinor. He looked no more than 28. Too young, she thought, to carry himself with so much quiet control. "You wish to pass?" he asked. "Yes," Elinor said. She tried not to stare, but she had never seen a man dressed so finely this close. "The market won't wait, and my family needs what I sell." He looked at the horses. "They need rest. The hill was steep, the road is bad, and this lane is narrow. If I move them into the ditch, they may slip." "That would be worse for all of us?" Elinor felt her fingers tighten around the basket handle. "Then could you at least pull to one side?" "There is no side," he said, almost gently. "You can go around." "Through that?" Elinor pointed to the deep mud. "If I fall, I lose everything in this basket. We can't afford that." Something flickered in his eyes, but his face stayed calm. "Sometimes we all must accept small losses for the sake of the greater good," he said. A few villagers murmured. Elinor felt their eyes on her. The old woman shifted on her stick, looking exhausted. The man went on. "We will move when the horses are ready." Elinor's heart pounded. Small losses, he'd said. He did not know that every egg in her basket was a full meal. He did not know about her father's cough or the empty jar where they kept rent money. To him, this was a delay. To her, it was a danger. She felt anger rise, hot and sharp. It climbed up her throat and into her hands. She bent down, scooped up a heavy clump of wet mud, and before she could stop herself, she threw it. The mud hit his beautiful blue coat with a thick, ugly slap. The lane went silent. The villagers gasped. The boy in the ditch stared, wide-eyed. The old woman's mouth dropped open. The coachman made a choking sound. Elinor froze, hands still outstretched. Her chest heaved. The mud slid slowly down the man's coat, leaving a dirty trail. The young man looked down at the mess. Then he lifted his eyes to her face. For a long moment, no one spoke. When he finally did, his voice was quiet. "What?" he asked. "Was that supposed to achieve?" "I need to get to market," Elinor said. Her voice shook, but she did not look away. "We all do. You stand in the road like a wall, so I treated you like one." A few people gave nervous laughs, quickly covered. The coachman stared at her as if she were mad. The man's eyes stayed on her. They were a clear gray, sharp but not cruel. He studied her face as if he wanted to remember every line. "What is your name?" he asked. Elinor's heart jumped. Names had power. Names could be written on paper, on lists, on notices nailed to doors. "It doesn't matter," she said, lifting her chin. "We're just tenants. We don't count, do we?" Something shifted in his eyes again, like a shadow passing over a still pond. "On the contrary," he said. Then he turned his head. "Pike, move the carriage forward, slowly. Keep the wheels out of the worst of it." "But, sir—" "Do it," the coachman grumbled. But he clicked his tongue and flicked the reins. The horses snorted and stepped forward. The carriage moved just enough to leave a thin, safer line of ground against the hedge. "There," the young man said. "You may pass. Carefully, if you please." Elinor's cheeks burned, but she adjusted her basket and stepped through the space. As she passed him, she could feel his gaze on her. She did not look back. The village folk followed her, some whispering, some hurrying, as if afraid he would change his mind. At the end of the lane, the old woman with the stick caught Elinor's arm. "Girl," she hissed, "are you mad? Throwing mud at a gentleman like that?" "He was in the way," Elinor muttered. "That's no common gentleman," the woman whispered. "Did you not see the coat, the horses? That's someone important. Might be the new owner of all this land, for all we know." New owner? Elinor's stomach twisted. By the time she reached the market, she could barely feel her hands. All through the selling and haggling, her mind kept replaying the slap of mud against the blue coat and the still way the stranger had stared at her. When she came home, the cottage smelled of cabbage soup and damp clothes. Her mother met her at the door. "Well?" she asked. Elinor handed her the coins. "I sold everything." Her mother let out a breath and smiled with tired eyes. "Good girl. Your father's resting. He had another bad spell, but the soup is on." She glanced at Elinor's face. "What happened? You look as if you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," Elinor said. "A carriage. And a man who thinks horses matter more than people." Her father coughed from his chair by the fire. "Carriage?" he asked. "What sort?" "Big, green, with brass." Her father and mother exchanged a look. "He's come," her father said softly. "Who has?" Elinor asked. Her mother reached into her apron and pulled out a folded letter, the paper thin from many hands. "This arrived 2 days ago. We didn't want to worry you before market." Elinor took the letter. The seal was broken, but she could still see the faint mark. A crest she did not recognize with a crown above it. She read the neat, strong handwriting. "From James Ashford, Duke of Merrick," she read aloud, slowly. "To the tenants of the Merrick estate. Be it known that upon the death of my uncle, I, James Ashford, have inherited all lands and properties under the Merrick name. I will visit each holding in turn to review leases and rents." Her voice trailed off. The room seemed to tilt. "Duke," she whispered. "He's the new Duke." Her father nodded. "Aye, and he can change every lease if he wishes, raise rents, clear land, evict who he likes." Elinor's hand shook. She saw muddy water, a narrow lane, a blue coat stained brown. "What does he look like?" her mother asked quietly. Elinor's throat felt dry. Dark hair, gray eyes, blue coat, calm, too calm. Her father frowned. "Did you see him? In the village?" "Yes," Elinor said, "and I—" She could not bring herself to say it. "You what?" her mother pressed. Elinor swallowed. "I threw mud at him." The cottage went very quiet. "You did what?" her father croaked. "He blocked the lane, wouldn't move, said the horses needed rest, like our time didn't matter, so I—" She looked at her hands, remembering the feel of the mud. "I lost my temper." Her mother dropped into a chair. Her father closed his eyes. "Elinor Hart," he whispered, "you have just thrown mud at the man who owns our house, our field, and the roof over our heads." A cold shiver ran down Elinor's back. For the first time she truly understood the title at the bottom of the letter. Duke of Merrick, a man who could, with a few strokes of a pen, take everything from them. And she had treated him like a stone wall in the road. For 2 days the whole village buzzed like a kicked beehive. The new Duke was in the lane, Mrs. Weatherby told anyone who would listen at the well. Carriage fine as a king's, and our Elinor Hart, bold as brass, threw mud right at him. Mark my words, there'll be trouble. "Elin," Tom Reed said that evening, shaking his head with a half-smile. "Only you." Tom was the village blacksmith's son. He was strong from working with iron and horses, with warm brown eyes and hands that always smelled faintly of smoke. He and Elinor had grown up together, climbing the same trees, splashing in the same stream. When they were older, people started teasing them. Then teasing turned to quiet nods when Tom walked her home. Then one day he had asked, voice serious and shy, if she would think about being his wife. She had said yes, not loud and sure, but in a soft way that made her mother cry with joy. Now he leaned against the stone wall by her gate, arms folded. "You couldn't have just shouted at him?" he asked. "I did shout," Elinor said. "It didn't help." Tom rubbed his face. "Elin, he could call the magistrate, he could tell the steward to raise your rent or worse." "I know," she said, her stomach tight. "I wasn't thinking about titles. I was thinking about eggs and Father's cough and the way he talked about small losses, like we're nothing." Tom's face softened. He reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough, but his touch was gentle. "I know why you did it," he said. "That's what scares me." "Why?" "Because you always stand up when something is wrong," Tom said. "And I love that. But men with power don't like to be told they're wrong." Elinor looked down at their joined hands. "Do you think he'll come here?" she asked. Tom sighed. "The letter said he would visit every holding. So yes, one day you'll hear wheels on that lane, and he'll walk right up to your door." That day came sooner than she expected. 3 mornings later, Elinor was hanging damp shirts by the hearth when the sound of hooves echoed up the path. Her father looked up from his chair. Her mother froze with a spoon in her hand. They all heard the carriage stop outside. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then her mother wiped her hands on her apron. "Door, Elin," she whispered, "and for the love of all things, mind your tongue." Elinor nodded, though her throat was dry. She went to the door and pulled it open. The same green carriage stood in the yard. The horses stamped and snorted. The coachman, Pike, sat on the seat, hat low over his eyes, mouth set in a hard line. The young man in the blue coat stood on the path, looking up at the cottage roof. He turned at the sound of the door. His eyes met Elinor's. For an instant the lane and the mud came rushing back. Her cheeks burned hot. He did not smile, but he did not look angry either. His face was calm, but his gaze held a spark of interest. "Miss Hart, is it?" he said. So he had found out her name. "Yes," Elinor said, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Elinor Hart." "I am James Ashford," he said, "Duke of Merrick." He said it like it was just a fact, like saying, "I am tall," or "It rained this morning." "My lord," her father called from the chair, struggling to stand. "Forgive me for not greeting you at the door. My legs don't always obey me." The Duke stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. He nodded toward Elinor's father. "Please, don't rise on my account," he said. "I am here to see the house and fields, not to make anyone fall over." Elinor's mother hurried forward, wiping her hands again, though they were already clean. "We're honored by your visit, my lord," she said. "If we had known you were coming, we would have baked something." "No need," the Duke said. He glanced around the small room. Elinor wished suddenly that the walls were cleaner, that the roof did not leak when it rained, that the chairs did not wobble. His gaze paused on the corner where a bucket sat beneath a dark stain. "Roof leaks?" he asked. "Sometimes," Elinor's father admitted. "We patch it as we can." The Duke's mouth tightened. "You should not have to set a bucket indoors every time it rains," he said. Then he seemed to catch himself. "But I did not come only to comment on roofs. I have your lease." He pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket. The sight of it made Elinor's stomach twist. Paper meant rules. Paper meant power. "The lease was signed by my uncle," he said. "There is a clause here, added some years ago." His eyes went to Elinor's father. "It says that if rent falls behind by more than 2 months, the tenant may be turned out at once, with no compensation for crops or improvements. Do you know this?" Her father looked down at his hands. "I know it," he said softly. "We had a bad harvest. Your uncle lent us grain. That was his price. I signed because I had children who needed to eat." Elinor remembered that year. She had been small, but she still recalled the hunger pains and the way her mother had scraped pots clean. "I see," the Duke said. His voice was flat, but his eyes looked troubled. "You are currently 1 month behind on rent. Is that right?" Elinor's mother swallowed. "Yes, my lord," she said, "but we will catch up. My husband is ill, but my daughter works hard. The harvest looks better this year. Just give us time." The Duke looked at Elinor. For a moment she thought he might still see the mud on her hands. "You threw mud at me," he said, in the same even tone, as if it were just another item on the list. Her mother's hand flew to her mouth. Her father closed his eyes. Elinor's heart pounded. She forced herself to meet his gaze. "Yes," she said. "I did?" "Why?" he asked. "Because you blocked the road," she said. "Because my family needed food, and every minute counted. Because you talked about small losses like we are pebbles you can step on." Silence. Her mother gave a soft groan. Pike, still outside, muttered something under his breath. The Duke did not raise his voice. He did not call for guards or papers or punishment. Instead, he said quietly, "Do you regret it?" Elinor swallowed hard. She thought of her father, pale and tired, her mother counting coins, the old woman in the lane leaning on her stick. "I regret that my temper frightened my parents," she said, "but I don't regret standing up for them." The Duke's eyes held hers for a long moment. Then, to Elinor's surprise, a faint smile touched one corner of his mouth. "Honest," he said. "Dangerous, but honest." He stepped back toward the door. "Show me the fields," he added. "I want to see what you grow." They walked the land together. Her father leaned on a stick, pointing out the rows of barley and the patch of potatoes. Elinor explained how they rotated crops, how they kept a few chickens, how she took eggs and butter to market. The Duke listened more than he spoke. Sometimes he asked sharp questions. Sometimes he just watched. At the boundary hedge, he stood still for a long time, looking at the land as if he were seeing more than dirt and plants, as if he was trying to picture who had walked these paths before him. "Do you like it here?" he asked suddenly. Elinor blinked. "Like what?" "This place," he said. "This cottage, these fields, this village." "Yes," she said at once. "It's home." He nodded, as if that answer mattered more than rent or clauses. On the way back to the cottage, he spoke quietly with his steward, Mr. Pike. Elinor could not hear every word, but she caught pieces. "Old terms. Harsh. Profits, your grace? Not a ledger, only." When they reached the yard, the Duke turned to her parents. "I will be reviewing all leases over the next few weeks," he said, "including yours. No one will be turned out before harvest. You have my word." Her mother's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you, my lord," she whispered. "It is not a gift," he said. "It is simply fair." "And after harvest?" Elinor asked before she could stop herself. He looked at her. "After harvest," he said, "we shall see what needs to change." He stepped back toward the carriage. "Pike," he called. "Onward." The coachman clicked his tongue, and the horses pulled. The carriage rolled away down the lane, wheels splashing through the mud. Elinor watched it go, her thoughts tangled. The Duke was not what she had expected. He had power, yes, a title, fine clothes, a carriage that blocked roads. But he had also listened. He had noticed the leaking roof. He had not shouted when she admitted what she had done. Still, the lease clause lay like a sharp stone in her mind. It could cut them at any time. "He's dangerous," her mother whispered as they went back inside. "Not because he shouts, because he doesn't have to." Her father sank into his chair, breathing hard. "He said no one would be turned out before harvest," he said. "We must trust that and do what we can." Elinor stared at the fading tracks of the carriage in the mud. He might be fair, he might be ruthless, he might be both at once. One thing was certain: the man she had thought was just a rude stranger in the road now held her family's future in his hands. The weeks that followed felt like living with a storm cloud overhead. Every time Elinor walked through the village, she heard whispers. "That's her," Mrs. Weatherby would say, nodding in her direction, "the one who flung mud at the Duke." Some people looked at Elinor with wide eyes, half afraid, half admiring. Others shook their heads as if she had done something foolish and unforgivable. Elinor tried to keep her chin up. She went to market, tended the garden, helped her father with the lighter work when he was strong enough. At night, she lay awake, listening to his cough, counting the days until harvest. The Duke became a familiar sight in Larkfield. He rode through on horseback sometimes, without the grand carriage, his coat more plain, a simple hat on his head. Once Elinor saw him stop to speak to the old woman with the stick. He bent to her level, listened, and then sent Pike to fix the broken fence behind her house. Another time he stood at the forge with Tom's father, watching him shoe a horse. He asked questions about the work, not in a rude way, but with real interest. When the horse shied, he stepped back quickly, then laughed at himself. Still, whenever his eyes met Elinor's, something like a spark passed between them. Not soft, not yet. More like two flints striking together. She never knew if he would nod or look away. Sometimes he seemed about to speak, then did not. Tom noticed. One evening they walked along the edge of the fields, the sky painted gold and pink. The barley moved in soft waves under the wind. "What are you thinking about?" Tom asked. Elinor hesitated. "Harvest," she said. "The Duke, the lease, all of it." Tom kicked a clump of dirt. "He's always around now," he muttered. Riding through the village like he wants us to forget, he holds our lives on paper. "He did say no one would be turned out before harvest," Elinor said, "and he fixed Mrs. Green's fence, and he sent medicine for old Mr. Dale." Tom made a face. Maybe he's trying to look kind before he changes everything. Rich men like to look kind. It makes them feel better about the hard things they do. Elinor sighed. Maybe? She glanced at him. Are you angry with me? Tom looked down at their joined hands. No, he said slowly. I'm not angry. I see the way he looks at you sometimes. Elinor's cheeks warmed. He looks at everyone, she said. He's the Duke. It's his job to look. Tom shook his head. It's not the same. They walked in silence for a while. Birds called from the hedges. A rabbit darted across the path. Finally, Tom stopped and turned to face her. Elin, he said, do you still want to marry me? The question hit her like a stone, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she had not expected him to ask it like that. Yes, she said quickly. Of course I do. He searched her face as if trying to see the truth behind the words. I need to hear you say it like you mean it, he said, not just because it's what we planned when we were kids. Elinor took his hands in both of hers. Tom Reed, she said, trying to make her voice firm. I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want something solid, something that doesn't depend on letters with seals and fancy words. Tom's shoulders relaxed a little. Solid, he repeated, that I can give you. They set a date for the wedding. After much talk and counting of coins, their families agreed on Harvest Sunday, the day after the last sheaves would be brought in. It felt like a good sign, a new life starting just as the fields gave their best. The vicar nodded when he heard. A fine day for a wedding, he said. Symbolic, the Lord provides. In the middle of all this, another letter arrived. This one was read aloud on the village green by Pike, who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. By order of His Grace James Ashford, Duke of Merrick, Pike called, his voice sharp and clear, all tenants are invited to gather on the manor lawn at noon on Harvest Sunday. His Grace will speak on the matter of leases, rents, and future plans for the estate. Attendance is strongly advised. A murmur ran through the crowd. People glanced at each other, their faces tight with worry. Noon on Harvest Sunday was only hours before Elinor's wedding. Her mother squeezed her hand. We'll go, she said. We must know what he plans. Then we'll go straight to the church. Elinor nodded, but her stomach knotted. To stand in front of the Duke twice in one day? It felt like too much. That night, she sat at the table with a scrap of cloth and a needle, trying to add small flowers to the hem of her one good dress. Her fingers fumbled, the thread tangled. Her mother watched her for a while, then spoke softly. Tom is a good man, she said. He'll make a kind husband. I know, Elinor said. You don't sound sure. Elinor stared at the tiny crooked stitch. I am sure, she said. I feel like the ground is moving, like nothing is settled. The Duke, the leases, Father's health. And in the middle of that, you're promising yourself to someone, her mother finished. That is a big promise, Elin. I know, Elinor whispered, but what else do we have, if not promises? The Duke has his papers. We have our word. Her mother sighed and put a hand over Elinor's. Then make sure your word is true, she said. Don't say yes at the altar if your heart is shouting no, even if the whole village is watching. Elinor thought of the Duke's gray eyes in the lane, in the cottage, in the village square. She thought of Tom's warm hands and steady smile. I'm not shouting anything, she said at last. My heart is just noisy. Her mother smiled sadly. That's what hearts do. As Harvest Sunday drew closer, the air filled with smells of cut grain and cooking. Carts rolled in from the fields piled with golden sheaves. Children ran after them laughing. Men wiped sweat from their brows and joked about sore backs. Women planned pies and stews for the harvest feast. Underneath all the busyness, the same question hummed like a low song. What will the Duke do? The night before the big day, Elinor stood outside the cottage, looking up at the stars. The sky felt huge. Her life in that moment felt very small. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and whispered a simple prayer like she had when she was little. "Please," she said, "let us keep our home. Let Father live to see my wedding. Let me not make a promise I can't keep." The stars did not answer. But the cool night air soothed her racing mind a little. Inside, her father coughed in his sleep. Her mother folded the last clean shirt for the morning. The world turned slowly toward the day that would change everything. Harvest Sunday dawned bright and clear, as if the sky itself wanted to look its best. Elinor woke before the sun. Her stomach felt tight, as if she had swallowed a stone. She dressed in her plain blue dress, the one she and her mother had spent evenings mending and decorating. The small stitched flowers at the hem looked shaky, but they were hers. Her mother braided her hair and pinned it up with care. "You look beautiful," she said softly. Elinor tried to smile. "Like a girl who threw mud at a duke," she said. Her mother swatted her arm lightly. "Today you're just a daughter and a bride," she said. "The mud is old news." At noon, the villagers gathered on the manor lawn. It was the first time Elinor had been this close to the big house. It rose above them with tall windows and stone walls, old and solid. The lawn stretched wide and green, edged by neat hedges and blooming flowers. Children ran at the back of the crowd until their parents pulled them close. Men stood with caps in hand. Women clutched shawls and whispered. Elinor stood between her parents. Tom stood a little behind her, his hand on her elbow. She could feel his nervous energy like heat. The Duke appeared on the front steps, wearing a dark coat and no hat. Pike and a few other men stood behind him, holding rolled papers. For a moment, the lawn was silent. "Thank you for coming," the Duke said, his voice carrying easily. "I know you have fields to tend and food to prepare. I will try not to keep you long." He held up a sheaf of papers. "I have spent the past weeks reading every lease and account on this estate," he said. "Some of what I found is sound, some of it is not." A ripple moved through the crowd. "When my uncle needed money," the Duke went on, "he sometimes lent grain or coin to tenants. In return, he added clauses to their leases. Clauses that allow eviction without notice if rent is late. Clauses that deny payment for improvements if land is taken back. Clauses that treat human lives like numbers on a page." He paused. His gray eyes swept over the crowd. Elinor felt them pass over her and move on. "These terms are legal," he said. "They were signed. They are written in proper form, but I have decided that they are not just." A murmur of surprise rose, like wind through barley. The Duke lifted the papers high, then tore through the top pages with a sharp rip. The sound made people jump. "From this day forward," he said, "all such clauses are void. No tenant will be turned out without fair notice and fair payment for what they have planted and built. Rent will still be due, but hardship will be met with talk and reason, not with sudden ruin." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then someone clapped. Another voice shouted, "God bless you, sir!" A cheer began, small and shaky at first, then growing into a loud, rough sound full of relief and joy. Elinor felt her father's hand grip hers so hard it hurt. Tears rolled down his cheeks. "We can stay," he whispered. "We can stay." Her mother sobbed openly, shoulders shaking. Elinor blinked hard. The tight stone in her stomach cracked a little. The Duke raised a hand, and the noise died down. "I am not a saint," he said. "I am not your savior. I am simply a man who has been given more power than any one person deserves. I intend to use it with a measure of conscience." He nodded once. "Enjoy your harvest," he said, "and your day." He stepped back. The crowd slowly broke apart, people talking, laughing, wiping eyes. Some tried to push forward to thank him, but Pike and the others gently steered them away. Tom turned Elinor toward the path. "Come on," he said. "We need to get you to the church." The small stone church sat on a hill overlooking the fields. Its bell rang as they approached, a clear sound cutting through the air. Inside, the candles were already lit. The vicar stood by the altar, shuffling his notes. A few villagers slipped into the wooden pews. Eager to witness the wedding of the girl who had thrown mud at a duke and lived to tell it. Elinor's hands trembled as her mother straightened her dress one last time. Tom's mother hugged her tightly, eyes shiny. "You'll be happy, my dear," she said. "Tom will see to that." Tom came to stand beside her at the back of the church. His hair was combed, his shirt clean, his smile strained but hopeful. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes," Elinor said. The music began, played by the vicar's wife on a small, slightly out-of-tune organ. Elinor walked down the aisle between rows of faces she had known all her life. Some smiled. Some watched carefully, waiting for something interesting to happen. Near the back, standing in the shadows by a pillar, she saw him, the Duke. He was not wearing his grand coat now, just a simple dark one. He did not push to the front. He stood quietly, hands clasped behind his back, watching. Her heart stuttered. For a moment, the church seemed to tilt. She forced her eyes away and focused on Tom. They reached the altar. The vicar smiled at them both. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here today in the sight of God." The words rolled over Elinor like waves. She heard them, but they did not sink in. Honor, keep, sickness, and health, till death do you part. Tom's hand was warm in hers. "Thomas Reed," the vicar said, "do you take Elinor Hart to be your lawful wedded wife?" Tom's voice was clear. "I do," he said. "Will you love her, comfort her, honor and keep her?" "I will." Elinor swallowed. Her mouth felt dry. Her fingers felt numb in Tom's. The vicar turned to her. "Elinor Hart," he said, "do you take Thomas Reed to be your lawful wedded husband?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The church grew very still. A child coughed somewhere in the back. The organist shifted on the bench. "Elinor," the vicar prompted gently, "do you take Thomas Reed?" Her chest tightened. Her heart pounded so loud she could hear it in her ears. Her mother's words came back, "Don't say yes if your heart is shouting no." It wasn't shouting no, but it wasn't shouting yes either. It was a jumble of voices. Her fear of losing her home, her thankfulness to Tom, her anger at unfairness, the Duke tearing up cruel clauses, the way he had listened, the way Tom had always stood by her. She saw a whole life in front of her, laid out like a road, a cottage, children, hard work, comfort, a man who would be kind, a path that was safe and known. And something inside her whispered, "Is this really your choice, or just the only door you see?" Her throat closed. She managed. Tom's grip tightened. The vicar waited. "I can't," she whispered. The word slipped out before she could stop it. "I beg your pardon?" the vicar asked, startled. Elinor's face burned. Tears pricked her eyes. "I can't say it," she said, voice trembling. "Not like this. Not today." A shocked murmur swept through the church. Mrs. Weatherby put a hand to her chest. Someone dropped a prayer book. Tom's mother gasped. Tom stared at her, hurt flashing across his face like lightning. "Elin," he said softly, "what are you saying?" "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "You deserve someone whose heart is sure. Mine isn't. Not yet. It's not fair to you if I lie at the altar." The vicar cleared his throat. Flustered. "Perhaps," he said, "we could take a moment." Tom shook his head slowly. "No," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were bright. "If she can't say it now, she shouldn't be forced." He gently let go of her hands. The whole church seemed to lean in. Tom turned to the vicar. "I won't hold her to this," he said. I love her too much to make her promise something she's afraid of." He looked back at Elinor. "You should have told me before," he said quietly. "But I understand." Elinor's heart broke. "I'm sorry," she said again. It felt like the only thing she could say. He nodded once. "I know," he said. The vicar, red-faced, stumbled through a few closing words. The service ended in a tangle. People did not know whether to stand, sit, leave, or pray. They drifted out in small groups, whispering fiercely. Elinor Hart called off her own wedding. Poor Tom. And right after the Duke's big speech, too. Elinor slipped out a side door, not wanting to face the crowd. She found herself behind the church, where the grass grew long and a low stone wall marked the edge of the yard. From here, she could see the fields stretching away, golden and peaceful, as if nothing had changed. She leaned against the wall and buried her face in her hands. Footsteps sounded behind her. She stiffened. "Tom?" she asked, not sure if she could handle seeing him. "It's not Tom," a quiet voice said. She turned. The Duke stood a few paces away, his expression unreadable. Elinor wiped her eyes roughly. "Have you come to find me for wasting everyone's time, too?" she asked, her voice sharp with pain. He shook his head. "No," he said. "I came to breathe. Churches make me feel crowded." She gave a wet laugh. "You and me both." He hesitated, then stepped closer. "What you did in there," he said, "was very brave." She barked out a humorless sound. "Everyone thinks I'm a coward," she said. "Too scared to say two little words." He shook his head. "If you were a coward, you would have said those words just to make the whispers stop. You chose truth instead of comfort. That is rarely cowardice." She stared at him. "It feels like I've ruined everything," she said. "Tom is hurt. His mother hates me. The whole village will talk." "They would have talked anyway," he said softly. "At least now they will be talking about a woman who refused to lie when it mattered most." Elinor looked away, toward the fields. The wind touched her hair. "Did you change the leases because of me?" she asked suddenly. "Because I threw mud at you and shouted about small losses?" He was quiet for a moment. "I changed the leases because they were wrong," he said. "But I might have walked past that wrong if not for a girl in the road who refused to act small just because I was standing higher." Elinor blinked. "So, yes," she said. He smiled slightly. "You make it sound as if you own the whole decision." She lifted her chin. "Do I?" He chuckled under his breath. "You own a part of it, whether you like it or not." Silence settled between them, not heavy this time, just full. "I cannot be only your landlord," he said quietly. Her heart stumbled. "You are my landlord," she said. "You are the Duke. You're everything here." He shook his head. "I am a man with land," he said. "That is what Duke really means. The title is nothing without people to walk on that land, to work it, to live on it. Today you reminded me that those people are not lines on a page. They are hearts. They are choices." He took a breath. "I have watched you in the village, Elinor Hart. I have seen you care for your father, work for your family, stand up when others stay quiet. He stopped, looked away, then back. "I will not ask anything of you today. You've had enough questions for one afternoon, but know this, your life is not ruined. You have simply refused to build it on a lie." He bowed his head slightly. "That is more than many in my position can say." Then he stepped back. "I will see you at harvest supper," he added. She frowned. "Harvest supper?" "Yes," he said. "I am opening the manor lawn for a gathering at the end of the season. All tenants will be invited. There will be food, music, and more talk of the future, assuming you still wish to be part of it." He gave her one last look, then walked away, leaving her with the wind, the fields, and the echo of his words. "Your life is not ruined. It did not feel true yet. but as she watched him go, she felt the tiniest crack of light in the dark corner of her heart. The days after the broken wedding were some of the hardest Elinor had ever known. People tried not to stare, but they did. When she walked through the village, conversations hushed and then restarted in low voices. Children asked blunt questions before being shushed. Tom kept his distance, which hurt more than any sharp word might have. She heard from others that he was working longer hours at the forge, hammering metal so hard the sound rang across the fields. Once she saw him from a distance on the road. He lifted a hand half an inch, as if to wave, then dropped it again and walked on. Her parents did their best to shield her, but they could not block out everything. "You did the right thing," her mother said every night, as if repeating it would make it sink in. Better a broken promise before the altar than a broken heart after. Her father, in his quiet way, simply held her hand when she sat beside him. She threw herself into work. The harvest was almost done. She helped gather the last of the potatoes, shook dirt from the roots, stacked firewood for winter. Simple tasks steadied her. The invitation to the harvest gathering came on a thin piece of paper delivered to every cottage. "You are invited to a harvest supper at Merrick Manor on Saturday next," it read. "Food and drink will be provided. Families welcome." Her mother smoothed the paper. "We should go," she said. "It would be rude not to." Elinor frowned. "I'm not sure the Duke wants the girl who ruined her wedding at his party," she said. Her father shook his head. "He asked for all tenants," he said. "We are tenants. We go." Elinor did not argue. Part of her was curious. Part of her wanted to see the man whose choices had already changed so much. On the evening of the gathering, lanterns glowed all along the manor lawn. Tables were set up with bread, roasted meat, pies, and jugs of cider. Music drifted from a corner where a fiddler and a flutist played simple songs. Children ran across the grass, shrieking with laughter. Old men sat on benches, telling stories about past harvests. Women admired the rows of candles in the windows. Elinor arrived with her parents, her stomach fluttering. She had chosen her best dress again, though it reminded her of the day in the church. She added a shawl with bright threads, hoping it would make her feel new. "The food," her father said, eyes wide. "Look at that ham. When was the last time we had ham?" "Last Christmas, when Mrs. Reed gave us a slice," her mother said quietly. They both fell silent at the mention of Tom's family. Elinor's eyes tried not to search for him, but they did. She spotted him near the edge of the crowd, helping carry a heavy barrel. His sleeves were rolled up, his arms dusty. He looked tired. He glanced over, saw her, and looked away quickly. Her heart sank, but she did not go to him. He deserved his space. The Duke moved among the people, not staying in one place long. He wore a simple dark coat again, without much decoration. He greeted the older folk by name, asked after children, listened to small complaints and bigger worries. When he came near Elinor's family, her father bowed stiffly. "Your Grace," he said. "Mr. Hart," the Duke replied. "How is your roof?" "Drier than last month," her father said. "Thanks to the new tiles you sent." The Duke smiled. "Good," he said. His eyes moved to Elinor. "Miss Hart?" "Your Grace," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. For a moment, the noise of the party felt far away. Then someone called his name from across the lawn, and he moved on. They ate, they drank sweet cider. Elinor watched her father laugh with an old friend, color in his cheeks for the first time in weeks. Her mother even smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Music started again. Some of the younger couples began to dance, spinning slowly in the lantern light. "Elin, go dance," her mother urged. "With who?" Elinor asked, glancing toward Tom. He stood with his arms crossed, talking to another young man, not looking at the dancers. "With anyone," her mother said. "With life, if you must." Elinor laughed and shook her head. "I'm fine here," she said. As if he had been waiting for that, the Duke appeared at her side. "Miss Hart," he said, "would you walk with me for a moment?" Her parents looked startled, but her father nodded. "Go on," he said quietly. Elinor's heart thudded. "Of course," she said. They walked away from the main crowd, toward the far edge of the lawn, where the light grew softer and the sounds of laughter turned into a low hum. From here they could see the fields lying dark and quiet under the evening sky. A few stars had already appeared. "I wanted to speak where we would not be overheard," the Duke said. "At least not too easily. Mrs. Weatherby's ears are sharp." Elinor gave a small laugh. "They're sharper than any fox's," she said. He smiled, then his face grew serious. "Elinor Hart," he said, "since the day in the lane, you have not left my thoughts as easily as mud leaves a coat?" She blinked. "That sounds like a complaint," she said. "It is not," he said. "It is simply the truth." He looked out at the fields. "When my uncle died, I inherited land, houses, money, and a very old way of thinking. I was raised to believe that a duke's main duty was to keep the estate profitable and his name respected. People were part of the picture, but not the center of it." He turned back to her. "Then I came here. I saw your father's bucket catching rain inside his home. I saw leases that treated struggle as an excuse for punishment. And I saw a young woman in a muddy lane who refused to bow just because I was sitting higher than she was." Elinor swallowed, her hands twisted in her shawl. "You say these things like I'm a hero," she muttered. "Most days I feel like a fool." "Fools do not make powerful men change their minds," he said. "Brave people do." He took a step closer. "I do not want a wife who only smiles and agrees with me because I am a duke," he said quietly. "I want a partner who will tell me when I am wrong, who will see people where others see numbers. Someone who will stand in a muddy road and say, 'Move.'" Her heart knocked against her ribs. "What are you saying?" she asked, though part of her already knew. He took a breath. "I am saying that I have come to respect you, Elinor, to admire you, to—" He hesitated, then finished. "To care for you more deeply than I expected, more quickly than is wise." She stared at him, wind tugging at her hair. "You hardly know me," she said. "You know I throw mud and ruin weddings. That's not much." He gave a brief, soft laugh. "I know more than that," he said. "I know you work when you're tired, that you love your family fiercely, that you chose honesty at the altar rather than safe lies. I have watched you help old Mrs. Green carry water when your own basket was full. I've seen you stop children from teasing the lame dog by the mill. These things matter to me." Her cheeks warmed. She hadn't known he noticed any of that. He looked straight into her eyes. "I cannot promise you a life without whispers," he said. "If you stand beside me, people will talk. Some will say you do not belong. Some will call you lucky. Others will call you foolish. The gap between us in rank will not vanish, because I wish it to." "I know," she said softly. "But I can promise you this," he went on. "You will not be a pretty thing on my arm. You will have a voice, a say in how this land is run, a home where your parents will always have a place. I will listen when you speak, even when it is hard to hear." He dropped to one knee. Elinor's breath caught. He did not take out a ring. He simply held out his hand to her, palm up, as if asking for trust. "Elinor Hart," he said, loud enough that a few nearby heads turned. "Will you marry me? Not out of gratitude for lease changes, not because of my title, but because you choose me, as I choose you?" The lawn seemed to hold its breath. Elinor's mind raced. Images flashed. Tom's hurt face at the altar, her father's tears on the manor lawn, her mother's quiet prayers, the bucket under the leak, the mud arcing through the air, the sound of paper tearing. She thought of the life she had nearly stepped into with Tom. It would have been good, safe, familiar, a path worn by many feet. This was different, wild and frightening, a path no one she knew had walked. "People will say I married you for your title," she said, her voice low. "Some will," he agreed. "Let them. You and I will know the truth." "Tom will." She stopped. "Tom has already lost enough." "Tom deserves someone whose heart is all his," the Duke said gently. "You could not give him that. It hurt him, but in time he will see you did not steal his future. You gave him a chance at a better one." Tears stung her eyes. "You speak as if you know everything," she said. "I know very little," he admitted. "Except this. My life before I came here was empty in a way I did not see until you threw mud at me and refused to give your name. I do not want to go back to that emptiness." He looked up at her, still kneeling on the grass in front of his tenants. "If you say no, I will still be your landlord. I will still honor the leases and try to do right. But if you say yes—" His voice grew softer. "If you say yes, we will build something new here. Together." The word "together" echoed in her chest. For once her heart was not noisy. It was clear. She reached out and placed her hand in his. "Yes," she said. A collective gasp went up from the nearest villagers. Some clapped, some stared. Mrs. Weatherby nearly dropped her cup. "You're sure?" the Duke asked, his eyes searching hers. "I won't lie twice," she said. "I say yes because I want to, because I see the man, not just the title, because you listened when you didn't have to, because you tore up paper that hurt us, even though the law said you didn't need to." He rose to his feet, still holding her hand. "Then I am the luckiest duke in the country," he said softly. He turned toward the crowd, his voice rising. "Mr. and Mrs. Hart," he called. "May I have your blessing to marry your daughter?" Elinor's mother had a hand over her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. Her father stood straighter than he had in months. "If she wants you, you already have it," her father called, voice thick. "Just promise me you'll never treat her like a line on a page." The Duke bowed his head. "I give you my word," he said. The harvest supper turned into something else that night. People talked, louder and faster. Some shook their heads. Others laughed and cried and hugged. Tom watched from the edge of the crowd, his face unreadable. Later, as the night grew darker and the lanterns flickered, he approached Elinor when she stood alone for a moment. "I heard," he said. Elinor's chest tightened. "Tom, He held up a hand. "Don't," he said gently. "You don't owe me more apologies. You were honest in the church. Be honest now." She swallowed. "I said yes," she said. "To him, not because he's a duke, because he sees me." Tom nodded slowly. "I always saw you," he said quietly. "But not the way he does, I think, and maybe not the way you need." She blinked back tears. "Will you ever forgive me?" she whispered. He took a breath, looking at the manor, the lawn, the fields. "I already do," he said. "I just need time to forgive myself for not seeing sooner that your heart was somewhere else." He gave a small, sad smile. "Besides, imagine the stories our children will whisper one day. Did you know our friend Elinor almost married the blacksmith before she married the Duke? It'll keep the village busy for years." She laughed through her tears. "You'll make some girl very happy, Tom Reed," she said. "I hope so," he replied. He stepped back. "Take care of them," he added, nodding toward her parents, "and make sure he takes care of you." "He will," she said, "or I'll throw more than mud at him." Tom laughed, shook his head, and walked away into the night. Months later, when the snow had melted and the first flowers appeared, Elinor stood at the front of the village church again. This time her dress was new, sewn with the help of women from 3 cottages. Her hair was braided with small white blossoms. Her hands did not shake. The church was full again, but the whispers held more wonder than judgment. Tom sat with his parents, his expression calm and peaceful. Mrs. Weatherby sat in the front row, eyes shining like she had been waiting for this story's next chapter. The vicar smiled. "Dearly beloved," he began. "Again?" Laughter rippled through the pews. This time, when he asked, "Elinor Hart, do you take James Ashford to be your lawful wedded husband?" she answered without hesitation. "I do," she said, clear and strong. Outside the church, after the ceremony, she stood with James, no, with her husband, on the steps, looking out over the village. "You know," he murmured, "if you had never thrown that mud, I might still be sitting in some grand house somewhere, thinking about ledgers and nothing else. And if you had moved your carriage right away," she said, "I might have gone to market and come home and never known your name." He squeezed her hand. "Strange," he said, "how something so small can change everything." She looked at the lane winding past the church, at the fields beyond, at the manor in the distance, at her parents standing together, at Tom talking to Mrs. Green, at children chasing each other in the yard. "It wasn't small," she said softly. "It was the first time I refused to act like I didn't matter." He touched her cheek. "You mattered long before that," he said. "Now the whole world will learn it too." As they walked down the steps together, the villagers threw petals instead of mud. The sun shone on the stones, the grass, the faces turned toward them. Elinor Hart, once just a tenant's daughter in a muddy lane, walked into her new life not as a prize on a duke's arm, but as a woman who had chosen and been chosen in return. And somewhere deep inside, a part of her still smiled every time she remembered the slap of wet earth on a blue coat and thought, that was where it all began.